Captain Kirk.
Fascinating.
I'm a doctor, not a mechanic.
Thank you, love you. Mwah.
Most illogical.
Aye, sir.
Well, that was different. Yep, lousy, but different.
Places, please, and here we go.
Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, bears, knurls, and things to episode 48 of the MuppeTrek podcast. I'm Jarman.
And I'm Steve. We're here to compare, contrast, and confer about our two favorite franchises. Jarman, what are those?
Those are the MuppeTrek and Star Trek, and we do one-to-one reviews of the Muppet Show and Star Trek, the original series.
And this week we'll be doing the Muppet Show. God, I can't.
This is all staying in. This is all staying in.
Petula Clark. I don't know if we can leave in a Bill Cosby impression, though.
Oh, it's staying. It's staying. He tried to say Petula Clark is the guess. Petula.
In the original series episode, A Private Little War.
A Private Little War. Just in case Bill Cosby wasn't clear enough for you. Folks, it's been a night. So it's going to be an important show because it's also the end of season 2 of the Muppet Trek, and we'll be talking, or Muppet Show rather. We'll be talking about that later tonight. But we have some feedback.
Oh, for once.
We were mentioned by
that's right.
By the Muppet Wiki on Twitter. And I know that each wiki that you find for each fandom is different, and it's not necessarily anything official by the actual properties themselves. But the Muppet Wiki, the one that has the Muppet Wiki on Twitter, they tweeted a picture of all the recently new Muppet podcasts that are available on all your podcast catcher things you can find. And we not only were mentioned on that tweet, but we are the first picture,
the top billing
on that picture. So follow Muppet Wiki on Twitter if you're on Twitter, and you'll see that we were tweeted recently. And I have to admit, there was some satisfaction to seeing all the other podcasts that were not mentioned by Muppet Wiki who were like responding saying, "What about us? What about us?" And like, too bad, guys. Too bad.
Muppet Trek. Also, you and I inadvertently, without knowing it, we got like ahead of the game.
Oh, yeah.
Doing this, not knowing that Muppets were going to be coming to Disney and there was going to be this whole reemergence of Muppet Show interest.
That's the thing. We were kind of hipsters to the Muppet interest.
We were ahead of the craze. And so because of that, I think we're at sort of the head of the list.
And that's fair. I think it is totally fair because, we weren't just jumping the bandwagon. We were there beforehand. So
we're doing this crap because we have nothing better to do. I love Muppets and you love Star Trek.
Yeah, before any of this Disney Plus crap happened. So, Steve, I think you need to tell us about our guest tonight, Petula Clark.
Well, Petula Clark, man, what can't you say about Petula Clark?
You can't say a lot.
She was a British musician who starred on BBC Radio as a child performer, actually.
Oh, okay.
She had a ton of international recordings in German, Italian, and Spanish, and she even had a string of really successful singles in the U.S., the most notable which is Downtown. Downtown.
Downtown. There, I had to, Steve.
She was deemed at one point the first lady of the British invasion.
Oh, okay.
And she still does performances in the UK, like as recently as last year.
Wow. Great.
What does our audience know her from? While you may not recognize her, I can guarantee you've heard some of her music somewhere, which has been used in soundtracks and shows and movies such as The Queen's Gambit, American Dad, and The X-Files.
Wow.
And Downtown was very notably used in Lost, and is what I will always associate Downtown with.
Wow, I don't remember that, but I love Lost, but I don't remember that.
It's a great opening of, I think, season 2 or 3, the one where they find the hatch, and you hear the song, and it's a guy in like a fallout bunker getting ready for his day. And it turns out it's Desmond on the island listening to Downtown.
So good.
Great reveal. Amazing reveal for season 3. So that's Petula Clark. But what the hell is she doing this week on The Muppet Show?
Yeah.
Backstage this week, there's a moose named Mickey Moose who sounds like John Wayne. And this devolves into a bunch of Mickey Mouse jokes with club hats and Ronald Duck showing up. It's really thin. It's really, really thin this week. On stage, though, Kermit introduces a seafaring Muppet singing a sea shanty. It's a lively number with some people you know, like Link and Nephew Robin. Mm-hmm. Petula comes out and sings The Boy from Ipanema with a pink, large, lanky monster. It's real nice. Next up, we get a chicken saloon sketch where a bad rooster comes into town and challenges the local law, and they have a duel, and it is brilliant. Following this, we get At the Dance. This week's jokes are mostly centered around disproportionate body parts. Afterward, we get Oop ID from the Swiss Alps, supposedly a silly song with nonsensical lyrics. And it's great. Up next, Petula joins Rolf and performs a lovely song, Too Shy to Say. It's a beautiful piano number and just really well performed. We then take a trip to the veterinarian's hospital where a sick patient is slowly slipping into the table, where he slowly falls into the table, and then the nurses and the doctor fall in as well. It's cute.
It is.
In the Swedish Chef's kitchen, he's making chocolate mousse where he tries to smear chocolate on the mousse, and the mousse is not having it. Petula's final number is ruined by the moose, who breaks all the glass on stage and eats all the flowers. And she assures Kermit it's going to be all right. And then they sing Tomorrow, where she's joined by various Muppets. Kermit thanks Petula one last time. The moose likes her too. And that's what we call the Muppet Show.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of this week's episode?
I really enjoyed this one. I think.
Really?
I did. I think it just flowed really well. I think even though the only negative I would say is that Petula wasn't stretched beyond her obvious strengths. Her singing a song. There was even times where like the camera work wasn't doing anything, which usually I'm so surprised as a film major. I'm surprised on the Muppet Show. They do a lot of great camera work. And during a couple of her numbers, they, obviously showed off her singing, which is wonderful, but they did nothing. It was just a silent camera, like sitting there doing nothing. So I was like very surprised at that. But otherwise, it played to her strengths. It did a lot of our favorite things about Veterinarian's Hospital, and all the other segments that we like. At the Dance was in there. Dance was in there, exactly. And I love the Ralph Petula song. I loved the chicken the chicken bar scene, chicken high noon or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Where Gonzo's the random bartender, where everyone else is chickens. And there was no words. Kind of reinforcing that he's some kind of bird, maybe. Yeah, and that's true. And also, my girlfriend watching it was just like, she loved that the fact that there was just chickens and nothing was spoken. No dialogue, but you knew exactly what was going on. And it was wonderful. Oh, yeah. And the chicken walking in with a cigarette in its mouth, I just laughed hysterically. But yeah, this had a great flow. I thought this episode, I loved Mickey Moose was a funny backstory for this backstage thing that was going on. And then what was the duck called? It was Ronald Duck. Ronald Duck. And I loved that whole thing. It was just, this whole episode was very high for me. It almost made my end of the episode thing, but not quite, because our thing is about the hosts, really, and it wasn't that the host blew this out of the water. It was just that this episode was very solid for me. It was a very entertaining, solid episode for me. See, I'm at the opposite end. I would almost put this in my bottom 3. Wow, it's almost there. I feel like they didn't stretch Petula. I feel like all the things you highlighted were sort of my big issues. It was an issue for me. They didn't highlight her. Agreed. They didn't highlight her well. She came in and did her shtick. Mm-hmm. Like, she did 3 songs, which is great, but she's not Elton John. They weren't her songs. They weren't giant hits. Too Shy to Say, or Too. Did I get that right? Whatever she did with Rolf. Too Shy to Say. Yeah, Too Shy to Say. It was a contemporary hit at this time. It was a few years old, and Stevie Wonder had made a big hit out of it on his 4th album, or one of his albums, God. But none of it was hers. So there was no ownership, and there was no Elton John's performing his song. There was none of that. It was just another singer. Yeah.
The At the Dance I felt was forgettable. Like the best joke was that balloon nose blowing up.
I laughed. I liked it. So here's the thing is that I'm the person who's always was unimpressed by Muppets before we took this venture into doing this. And now I'm falling in love with Muppets and their humor. And this episode felt solid in all those Muppety ways, I guess. I don't know, but
I don't know, man.
Yeah,
man.
Huh. Interesting. This is the first. This is the first for us guys.
We've had one or two before this where you've really liked and I've hated. But
I guess, but not this far in opposition.
I don't know. I feel like this is almost Florence Henderson. Like Florence Henderson also just stood in front of a camera.
No, Florence Henderson was just not. She has no charisma. She is terrible. Whereas Petula Clark, I never heard of her before my entire life, and I knew the song Downtown, but I didn't know it was by her. But she was dancing, she was singing, she was entertaining, she was fun. Florence Henderson, who I knew to be entertaining and interesting, was boring as fuck.
So do you think maybe that's what poisoned us again? Maybe that's why we like these less known hosts more, is that we go in with no taste in our mouth?
That is true. Yes, because Florence Henderson I've known to be very entertaining, and she was terrible on Muppets. Whereas Petula Clark I have no expectations for and was pretty entertaining.
See, I think the other issue is that, and maybe it's hard to judge season 1 because season 1 is so different from season 2.
Yeah, there's more money in season 2 for sure.
And gimmicky season 1 was, and those short little cuts and those quick like 2-liner jokes backstage. And the talking houses and the
talking houses,
the talk panel
I'm so
show
glad
they would do every season. I like the talk panel show. I will say there were some that were okay.
Yeah, I'm upset that the talk panel show is not around anymore. Actually,
some of the guests really lended themselves to it. I remember Pete Ustinov's was really good. Rita Moreno's was really good.
Yeah.
I don't know. So it's just funny that it's almost at the top for you and it's almost at the bottom for me for kind of the same reason.
That's weird. But it didn't quite get to my top because it was just the host was okay, but she wasn't. And
it didn't quite get to the bottom because it wasn't Florence Henderson.
Right. Exactly. Because how can you beat that? But we'll talk about that later because you might.
Right.
You might.
Music this week, The Sea Shanty, written by Abe Burrows, writer of musicals like Guys and Dolls and How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying.
Oh my gosh, our history brother.
That's right. The Boy from Ipanema, or more commonly, The Girl from Ipanema, a Brazilian bossa nova song from the 60s. The English lyrics were penned sometime later by a guy named Norman Gimbel, who was known for taking French and Portuguese songs and putting in the English. However, he also wrote the lyrics for Killing Me Softly with his song.
Wow.
That's right. Same guy.
Didn't know that.
Girl from Ipanema.
Wow.
The Mickey Mouse Club, the Mickey Mouse March. I almost got that wrong. Written by Jimmy Dodd. He was actually the master of ceremonies on the show and wrote most of his own songs that he performed on the Mickey Mouse Club. Oop ID. This is maybe the hardest I've ever found to digging out info about one of these songs. It's a Civil War song, which from what I can gather is mostly about the company hating the company bugler. So no matter what's going on, they hear that trumpet, and that's the oop ID, oop I da lyric is them hearing the bugler.
Weird.
Too Shy to Say, written by Stevie Wonder and released just a few years before this, as I mentioned, in 1974. Fun Stevie Wonder fact, he has won 25 Grammys.
Jesus.
And he's only tied for 10th place for most Grammys ever won.
10th place?
With 3 other people. U2, Kanye West, and some country music guy named Vince Gill.
Well, I know Vince Gill, but still Kanye West, Jesus Christ.
Right.
No.
If it makes you feel any better, the people that have like the absolute most are people you have never heard of.
Really?
The guy who has the most at 31 is like an orchestra conductor.
That makes sense.
And so he's won like opera recording, orchestral arrangement, orchestral, like
all the Grammys.
He's won 31 of those, by the way.
That makes sense.
Tomorrow from Annie, which was only a few years old at this point. The song was originally written for a short film called Replay.
Oh.
And was reworked by its composer, Charles Strauss, when he started working on Annie. So Tomorrow is not from Annie.
Fascinating.
A short film.
I never knew that.
From 1970. Jeremy, what did you think was the best Muppeteering moment this week? I think I know.
Well, No, there were a couple contenders, because one was the one in the boat was a close second place.
Okay.
Because that was just fascinating, in the way they did that and the singing at the end. But no, the boy from Ipanema was my favorite Muppet moment.
Really? The big Muppet was what did it for you?
Oh, it was just so wonderfully done, and the way it interacted with her, and eventually gave her the flower at the end, and it went from a regular face to a smile at the end, and like they just coordinated all of that so well. I thought that was fantastically done. So the boy from Ipanema was my favorite.
I liked how nonchalant she was. She's like, I'm going to wake up in this lawn chair and stretch and then walk into blackness.
Of course. Like you do.
It's so funny to just watch her like, I've got to fill 6 seconds of time here. All right, let's get the number stuff. What about you? I've got to give it to the Chicken High Noon.
Oh, yes.
So much to be communicated with no dialogue is in itself impressive. And for it to be done so well and choreographed so well and a lot of puppets involved, it was just an all-around winner.
Oh, my girlfriend's getting to know our show a lot better in the format. And she was like, favorite MuppeTrek moment, the chicken segment. Absolutely. Yeah. She said the same thing. She agreed with you.
I mean, the fact that I put it on and we were watching it over dinner a few days ago. And at the moment that the Black Rooster came in, Joyce Litton went, "That's the bad guy."
Ah, yes.
Without me having to say anything. She just knew the archetype and knew that was the bad guy. A chicken with no dialogue.
And I will say, future fast forward to the episodes we'll watch later, but that's exactly what happens in the episode of Star Trek, where they have a blonde wig for the good guys, a dark wig for the bad guys. And that's what happens in this chicken segment.
It happens in this episode we watched too.
Yeah, exactly. But
that's amazing.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
So this concludes, Petula Clark concludes season 2 of The Muppet Show. We've made it through 2 complete seasons of The Muppet Show, Jarman.
We have. That is nuts. And I'm so happy about it. I've never seen this show before. This is new to me. As Star Trek is mostly new to Steve. And so this is great. I'm done with season 2 of The Muppet Show. I'm so excited.
Right. We're getting into like the much bigger budget season. So we're going to see some much more opulent sets and numbers. We're getting to a very exciting time in Muppet Show.
Absolutely.
But when we finished reviewing season 1, we went through and we said, what were our top 3 episodes from this season? And what were our bottom 3 episodes from this season? So we're going to take that, extend it a little bit further. We're going to do top 3 and bottom 3 from this season. And then we're going to decide if any of them knock out from our previous top 3 and previous bottom 3.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll find out what our cumulative top 3 and bottom 3 are. So let's start with the worst episodes this season.
The worst this season. All right.
The absolute worst this season. I'll go first. I don't think this is going to be controversial. Bob Hope.
All right. Yes, that is one of mine as well. So Bob
Hope.
Not
enough Bob Hope, lackluster numbers, very limited laughs and interactions. And for having such a great guest, it felt like such a throwaway.
Either he was too old, someone was afraid to write for him, he wouldn't accept writing from writers. Something happened where it was just not funny. It wasn't entertaining. It was bad. It fell flat. It was bad.
Yes.
Complete.
Agreed.
Yes.
So bottom of the season, Bob Hope. I'm sorry, Bob.
No, we're both there. Sorry.
The cowboy sketch did you in.
I mean, that would probably be his best thing on the episode, but it just still.
But it was also the only number he was in, so it's hard to tell.
Nothing else. It didn't work. No, it was bad. Okay,
Bob Hope, we're sorry.
Okay.
You're an American legend, but you were terrible in this season.
Yes, very true.
What's one of yours?
My other one is I had to look through. I went through every single host, and I had to look back at my notes for each one and see what did I say about them? But no, Rich Little was terrible.
Rich Little is also on my bottom 3 from this season.
All right, good.
The episode itself wasn't that bad.
No, the episode wasn't bad
because the backstage plot was like Gonzo auditioning chickens, dancing chickens.
I think we're going hosts here. I think we're kind of going hosts here by accident or on purpose. I don't know, but we're doing that.
But I think the host makes the episode.
Yeah,
kind of. At the end of the day, you can have a great episode and a shit host, and it's a shit episode.
Yeah, exactly.
So while there were some really bright moments, Rich Little's impressions don't connect with our generation.
Nope.
So there was also that barrier. I'm willing to admit it. But even his impersonation of the Muppets was really, really poor.
But beyond that, I think Steve and I will say this authentically, we are genuinely in touch with what impressions he was doing of those people.
We had a pretty good idea
from that generation because we're kind of older souls and we know those people he was talking about. He's not very good at them either. He wasn't good at the impressions he was doing in general. So, like, I don't understand how this person got famous. I just don't get it. It was bad. It was bad.
Maybe he was just like an original. Maybe not many people did impressions. So even he, like, who could kind of do an impression.
That's a good point. Maybe that was the point. Maybe he was just the first guy to, like, do that kind of comedy consistently. You're right.
Yeah. Or you get known for one, like, for all we know, it was like one part of his routine.
Yeah.
And suddenly that's what he's known for. And now he's impressionist Rich Little.
Maybe Rich Little started the impressionist comedy stand-up routines. You're right.
Maybe.
If that's the case, then more power to him. Yeah, absolutely. I'd appreciate him more if that was the case. Yeah.
Overall, a droll episode.
Ugh,
forgettable.
terrible.
Not one that we recommend watching.
It's bad.
All right. My third one for my bottom three this season. And people might get real mad. And it kind of falls into the same category as Bob Hope. I've got George Burns.
Okay. That wasn't mine. So explain. Yeah, that's great.
He was a hoe. He was so old. He couldn't do anything, and it really showed. They had no choice but to just have him do his shtick and nothing else. And that sucks. That's not what the Muppets is about. The Muppets is about being Muppety and getting guests to do crazy, fun things. Not like another stage for George Burns to go smoke on
and tell slow jokes
he's been telling for the last 45 years.
And still tells them until 1999 when he's 100 years old.
Right. So yeah, for that reason, George Burns was just a very limited guest, and it showed. It just showed.
Oh my gosh, because he was very close to make my bottom three.
Ooh. Okay, so who's your last?
He was, but it was a good point though. He was very close because like it just wasn't entertaining. But since I did ventriloquism in my youth. And
Edgar Bergen.
I looked up to Edgar Bergen in my youth. I had an Edgar Bergen ventriloquist dummy in my youth, Mortimer Snerd. Edgar Bergen was a disappointment to me because he was a very bad ventriloquist. It was not.
Maybe he was better at some point in his youth.
Maybe
he was. He was a ventriloquist on the radio for years. There's no one
on the radio. He's basically a voice actor at that point. Yeah, he's a voice actor. I'm hoping he was a great voice actor, but he was a terrible ventriloquist. And he was the person I modeled myself after when I was a young person to be a ventriloquist. And he was terrible. He was awful. And so I hope he was better when he was younger. The jokes weren't funny. Nothing was good about that episode. So he was my bottom worst for that. He was disappointed to me personally. He was a disappointment to me.
So looking at it now, and I remember saying this, I think when we reviewed it, it's such a shame that one of the best Muppet Show musical numbers of any season is in this piece of dump episode.
Which one was it?
Time in a Bottle, where the old guy, he's a scientist and he's mixing things, singing Time in a Bottle, and then he drinks them and gets older and older and older.
I looked back at my notes for Edgar Bergen, and that was in my notes how great that was. And it was great. It was.
to put it in the middle of such a bum episode.
Oh yeah, because that was a fantastic number. I wish that could be transplanted somewhere else because Edgar Bergen just bowled the shit out of that.
So I think it's funny that 3 of our cumulative bottom 4 are basically these guys who are too old to do anything.
Yeah. Well, Rich Little was like 45. He was fine. He was just
3 out of the 4. Rich Little was a piece of shit.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. Three out of the 4 of them. It's just they were past their prime, I guess, and they didn't care. They didn't want to be there, so that they made terrible episodes. You're right. It's that they were just like, I don't want to be here. This is bad.
Just one more stage for George Burns to smoke and tell jokes.
Yes, exactly. All right, guys. If you haven't left yet, if you're still listening, here are our best. Here's some best.
Here's the best.
All right. Yeah. Steve, go for it. Go for it.
First, recent Zero Mostel. Great host.
We're in agreement. It's one of my top 3.
he almost becomes one at points. He talks about joining the monsters at the end. That great poem about his fears.
Yeah,
just such a great,
so wonderful,
iconic sketch.
I fell in love with that.
All around great episode.
And no one's ever like, I want to become one of the Muppets. Like, he embraced that to no end, and it was just beautiful. It was wonderful. So that's it's also one of my best. Yes.
Okay, so you got it in the top 3.
Yep.
I thought that was the one I was like, I'm pretty sure we're gonna agree on.
It's in my top 3. Yeah.
What's your next one? My
next one is actually Bernadette Peters.
Okay.
I thought she perfectly fit in with the Muppets. She was the musical presence there was wonderful, and season 2 she was. I looked through every single episode like one by one, and I was like, oh, I felt so much happiness her being in that episode, and she fit basically. What do you think about, before you really read her next, what do you think about Bernadette Peters in that episode?
I was good. I'm looking at the episode now, and she just got such a good voice. And I think that maybe if I remember correctly, that was like our one critique, was that she was just such a better singer than the Muppets. Because she has that clear tone that can like cut through anything. She's a Broadway aficionado. Yeah. And so I think our one complaint was that she was so much better
she made him look bad.
that she made him look bad, which is a good problem to have, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think she was one of those guests that I remember saying like she felt comfortable with the Muppets, and she was there with them, and she was one of them, and they were singing with her. But it's good that she was the best, because like she's the guest star, and so like she's the best, and so like I felt that like that episode just really stood out for me because she stood out in that episode and didn't feel uncomfortable. Finally, a legend like Bernadette Peters was not a disappointment.
Filling the role of a legend.
Yeah, she fulfilled her role on the Muppets as a legend, and but she also was cool with them. That was why she made me one of the best. Yeah.
Similar impressive female singers. I've got Cloris Leachman on there.
Nice.
Not only did we get to hear her sing a ton, like in crazy range. This was the episode that featured the awesome backstage pig takeover plot.
Yes.
That is not even arguably, it just is the best backstage plot we've seen. And you add that to a good host, and it just turns into a great episode.
That is very fair argument. I totally agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. That's.
Oh, yeah. Cloris Leachman.
Because Cloris Leachman is also awesome. And
yes,
and that backstage plot is more than what we've seen in a lot of episodes. So that makes a lot of sense. My last one is Rudolf Nureyev.
Okay. You really did like that one.
I did like it, not because of Rudolf Nureyev being a strong performer or actor.
No, that's certainly not accusatory in that episode.
He's a great dancer, but he's also very passionate. You could tell he loved the fucking Muppets. And so it showed in every performance he was there for. And also it showed because we know the backstory. I was influenced by the backstory. I had to admit that once he was on that show, they were able to have more guests come on the show because he was so notorietable. That's not a word. Is that a word?
Maybe he was a gateway guest.
He was a gateway guest. So it felt that way, and that everyone was so passionate about him being there, but he was also passionate about being there himself, that it was just like a very passion fueled episode for me. And so I really like that episode. It stood out. Yeah. It stood out for me.
He was pretty bad in his musical numbers, but he never stopped trying.
He wanted the hell out of being there.
You could see him struggle. He was struggling through those numbers, but he was gonna struggle.
And he loved every minute of it. You could tell it. He was like,
maybe it's cold outside with Miss Piggy.
Oh yeah. It was weird, but you felt like he wanted to be there. Yeah. So that was my top 3. Yeah.
And he got to tap dance. That was exciting.
Yeah, he was good at it.
I've got to put in as my third slot, Elton John.
Oh.
It is just hard to argue.
Yeah.
Against the musicality of that episode. If nothing else, the musicality is enough to sell it, I think.
Well, and the Muppets being incorporated into his musicality. Yes, absolutely.
Oh yeah, and they were in every number, even though it was him performing. It wasn't just him on stage performing.
It was
alone.
Muppets performing that with him. Yeah.
Right. Crocodile Rock with crocodiles.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. That's very
so for
true.
that reason alone, I just don't think there's any other episode we've had yet that can even remotely touch the musicality of the Elton John episode.
Musicality, I agree with you entirely. Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
So now, Jarman, let's start with bottom 3.
Uh-huh.
Do any of these new bottom episodes change your bottom 3?
Yes. And my notes, I wrote all of my worst replace my last list.
Really?
These are worse than all of my bottom list because they are all bigger disappointments.
So your worst were all worse than Florence Henderson.
Yes, because these worst. Hold on. I like doing impressions. I'm a voice actor, so I like doing impressions. I've liked it since I was like 10 years old. I recorded impressions on Saturday Night Live so I could redo them on a VHS cassette tape. And Rich Little did such a bad job that it pisses me off. Edgar Bergen, I fucking had his dummy, and I was doing ventriloquist acts, and he did a terrible job on the Muppet Show. Bob Hope.
So it's more about personal betrayal.
Yes, it's personal betrayal and vendettas. That's what it's all about.
That's why we do this show. Vendettas and revenge against old dead comics.
Dead comics. I bet Rich Little is still alive. I bet he is still alive.
He is alive and Canadian as shit.
Yes. Canadian as shit. Fuck you, Rich Little. You didn't try hard enough. Bob Hope. Horrible. Not because I've never wanted to be a stand-up comic. I'd never wanted that, never desired that. But I can recognize when you are successful and you don't give a shit anymore. And that's where he was. And he gave no shits. So all 3, this is not the same for my best, but all 3 of my worst replace the worst of my first season.
Wow. That's impressive.
Okay.
That's really impressive.
Because my worst for first season were Florence Henderson, Lena Horne, and Harvey Korman. And Harvey Korman was a disappointment, but it wasn't necessarily his fault because, whatever. Writers, week it was, whatever. But the Rich Little, Edgar Bergen, Bob Hope, it was their fault. So fuck
so
them.
They take them.
Fuck them.
Wow.
Fuck them.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I had 2 out of 3 sink in to the bottom 3. Florence Henderson holds her spot for me. It was so bad.
Fair enough.
But Bob Hope easily knocks out Mum and Shots.
Yes.
Because at least Mum and Shots was doing something original.
Yes. Fair.
And not telling the same jokes I've been telling for 50 years.
Totally fair.
And then Rich Little knocks out Ben Vereen. Because my big issue with the Ben Vereen episode is it was a lot of missed potential. But Rich Little's episode was just flat out bad.
Oh my God. I totally approve of this. This is totally.
So my issues with Ben Vereen seem very minor now compared to my issues with Rich Little.
Exactly. Like Ben Vereen, like you just had bad writing, but whereas like Rich Little, you had the writing, you just suck.
All right. So now let's talk top 3 the top 3 episodes between season 1 and 2.
Oh yeah. So top 3, my best list. I had Ethel Merman, which I'm going to replace.
Ooh.
I'm going to replace with Zero Mostel.
Okay, I could definitely see that.
So now it's Peter Ustinov, Zero Mostel, and Bruce Forsyth.
You got Bruce up there.
Yes, Bruce Forsyth as the best Muppet Show host thus far. So
okay,
the only person who was replaced was Ethel Merman.
I thought yours was Lena Horne. Am I crazy?
Wait, I didn't see the top of my people. Hold on.
Oh no, you got it. Ethel Merman. I was thinking of your lowest. My bad.
But what are my highest? My highest
were Pete, Ethel, and Bruce.
Yes, Peter Ustinov, Ethel Merman, and Bruce Forsyth were my best.
Okay.
And for this list currently was Bernadette Peters, Rudolph Nureyev, and Zero Mostel, but only one of them moved up to the best and knocked off Ethel Merman, which was Zero Mostel.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yes, I absolutely get that.
What about you?
My new top 3, Peter Ustinov holds a spot. He became a Muppet, great host.
Yep.
Zero Mostel knocks out Kay Ballard.
Okay.
Because Zero Mostel also really became a Muppet. And while I loved Kay Ballard's performances and interaction, it doesn't beat what Zero did. It just can't.
Yeah.
And then I knocked out Paul Williams because his episode was in there mostly because of the musicality. And I was like, well, the Elton John episode eclipses that. So Elton John has moved into the place of Paul Williams episode in my top 3.
Totally fair. Because
Pete Ustinov, Zero Mostel, Elton John.
That Paul Williams episode was very good. So I get that.
Cool. All right. Well, that's our opinion. That's the end of season 2. We'll do that at the end of every season. And we have a similar Star Trek recap coming up in just a few episodes. We're getting to the end of season 2 of Star Trek.
Season 2 of original series of Star Trek will be coming up soon. So stay tuned, folks. That'll happen.
All right. Well, talking of Star Trek and away from the Muppets and terrible, terrible Rich Little. Charmin, what happened on this week's episode of Star Trek, the original series?
So for tonight's episode, we have a private little war. And this is where Kirk, Spock, and Bones are going down to the planet called Neural, where Kirk visited several years ago, where he was studying the locals there and found them to be very peaceful and called it basically an Eden. He even befriended one of their leaders there called Tyree. While they were studying the planet, Kirk and Spock discovered that a group of the Hill people that Kirk befriended previously when he was there, including Tyree, are about to be ambushed by another group of villagers that are armed with rifles. So before, they only had bows and arrows and spears, so Kirk's very confused by this. So Kirk wants to warn them or protect them with his phaser, but Spock tells them that this would be against Starfleet orders. So Kirk throws a rock instead, which distracts the villagers and alerts the Hill people to the ambush. Kirk and Spock run from the villagers and are then transported safely back to the Enterprise with Bones. But before they can be transported back, Spock is shot with a musket blast and he is gravely wounded. And we're like, oh my God, is Spock going to die? So once back on the Enterprise, they detect a Klingon ship is nearby. So Kirk suspects that the Klingons are the ones who contaminated the planet's culture and gave one side of them firearms, the villagers instead of the Hill people. So Kirk and Bones get into native costumes and beam back down to the planet and investigate. They are immediately attacked by the Mugatu, which is a very popular original series character, which is basically a ape suit with some...
A white ape suit with some horns on it.
With some horns on it and a tail. But it's a very famous, bad-looking character from the original series. But it's lovable. It's lovable. It's a native monster to the planet. Kirk is bitten by the Mugatu in the fight, and it poisons him, to which he tells Bones only Tyree and his people can heal him from this poison. And if on cue, Tyree's people show up and Bones tells them, help Kirk, save him. So Tyree's wife is a witch and she is able to heal Kirk of his poisoned state. But in return, he is forever indebted to her. But she only heals Kirk in the first place if Tyree tells her all about where Kirk and his friends came from. So Tyree tells her all about where they came from space and they have these advanced technology, that kind of thing. Therefore, Nona, which is her name, Tyree's wife witch, knows that Kirk and his friends would have the tools to help the Hill people defeat the villagers. So when Kirk fully recovers from healing, he asks Tyree about the villagers' weapons, these rifles they seem to have. And Tyree says that he first saw them a year ago and thought the villagers were making them on their own. But that couldn't be possible. So Kirk, Bones, and Tyree try to sneak into the village to investigate these crazy weapons. They find that the Klingons were indeed helping the villagers build these weapons. And they even catch a Klingon admitting it in front of them. So Bones and Kirk try to escape. They attack the Klingon and the villager, run outside, subdue 2 other guards, and get the hell out of there with Tyree, who is waiting outside. Kirk takes the Hill people one of the rifles, and he tries to teach them how to use it. He then gets into a philosophical argument with Bones about how the neural people must be at least fighting on a balanced fight between the villagers and the Hill people, and how they should provide the Hill people with the same weapons as the village people. And Bones disagrees because it's a complicated argument. Then Kirk is seduced by Tyree's witch wife, Nona. And that's basically what she is.
That's absolutely right.
And he sees it happening, and he's about to Tyree sees that his wife is seducing Kirk, and Tyree's about to shoot Kirk, but instead he drops the weapon and runs away because Tyree's a good guy. He doesn't want violence. He doesn't want evil and fighting. But then the Mugatu, another Mugatu, possibly the wife of the fellow Mugatu who died earlier, attacks Kirk and Nona. But Kirk finally disintegrates the Mugatu with his phaser. And then Nona knocks out Kirk with a rock and takes his phaser. Nona then encounters a group of villagers and tells them that she has the weapons and the path to victory. They don't believe her, so they start to terribly assault her, which is awful. So Kirk, Bones, and Tyree find her. The villagers think it's a trap, and they stab and kill her. Tyree then agrees that he wants more fire sticks to avenge his dead wife, more rifles. So Kirk tells Scotty to make 100 rifles for them to use. End of episode. So, Steve, what did you think of this episode of Star Trek?
All right, so things I liked. I don't know. I didn't like this episode that much, honestly. It was nice seeing Star Trek trying to do commentary on something very specific. Like this was very clearly like a Cold War
and Vietnam War kind of thing. Yeah,
us arming both sides, but the Vietnam War was effectively a part of the Cold War.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Trying to arm up both sides and endorse a regime because it endorses you,
right?
But it's only fair to give weapons to both sides. Like even that, there was nothing veiled about that. And I found that very impressive because most of the time Star Trek's much more veiled.
Right.
There were some actual smart things being done. At one point, Kirk was cold and McCoy used his phaser to heat up a rock. And it showed the lady what the phaser could do and move the plot along. It was like the perfect smart thing. I was like, oh, that was a good Star Trek moment. Good for you.
A good plot point.
Episode. Yeah, like something smart happened and it moved the plot. Good. Things I didn't like. Man, I really wish they'd make up their goddamn minds about interfering with like less advanced races.
True.
It's really hard to take it seriously anytime they bring it up. Like, it seems like something really nice they'd like to do.
Well, there is an important part of this episode where they say that if we find out that the Klingons have directly interfered, we can directly interfere. And that's important because it's like we have to help them equally to how the Klingons have interfered. So I kind of get that interjection there. So they made that make sense.
I liked how unhelpful Bones was.
In what way?
So like they have future space magic medicine.
Right.
Spock was shot by a gun.
Mm-hmm.
And McCoy walked away from stabilizing Spock saying, well, he'll live or die now, Jim. I don't know which. Come on. You have space magic. Come on. And I get that, like, they like blaming it on the fact that he's a Vulcan. Like, they bring that up a lot. They even brought it up here.
Well, they had the Vulcan expert thing. They had the Vulcan expert there.
Right, but then they had a Vulcan expert. So why was this even a fucking issue?
Dr. Mbenga.
Who, from like the Vulcan Wars or something too. Like, he's seen trauma and we don't feel good about Spock making it. Are you kidding me? You're on the starship. So that was tough. Unhelpful Bones was unhelpful.
Fair.
Why does so many of these episodes feature women doing witchcraft?
Because women in the 60s are witches. That's what we do.
Women doing witchcraft. There was a moment, as soon as I heard the phrase native costumes, I said to myself, this is going to be a little bit racist. As soon as Kirk said, computer, we need native costumes, I went, ugh. It could have been worse though. It was not that bad. And I could not for the life of me understand Nona's motivation.
Yeah,
Like,
if we had known her
power-
people better, that would have been better because we didn't know her people at all.
And seeking to align with the most powerful ally, maybe.
Sure.
But at the end, when she got attacked, I was like, what was she looking to gain out of this?
Yeah, like we need to know more about her people, basically. That would have been more important.
We know that they're like mystical witches. And that's pretty much what we found out.
Right.
Overall, a middling to low episode for me.
Okay.
And I honestly can't even pinpoint why. It just didn't do it in any of the categories.
For me, I actually put it to a very solid middle high episode because just the fact that I didn't feel it dragged at any point. It just kept going and was very propelled forward by plot and action and things that were happening, which there are other episodes where I feel are more important or more interesting, but this episode never felt like it was dragging.
True, there's a lot of physical movement.
Yeah, and there were things that they weren't physical movement for the sake of physical movement. They are important to the plot. Like I felt like this was structured well.
Oh yeah, he got attacked. Great, we have to get him to the village. Oh, what's his face isn't at the village. Someone go find what's his face and bring him here.
Right.
Oh, what's his face is coming. Great, they healed him at the village. Oh, they've got to go back to their ship. You know, like
it's as if they had a good crafter of a screenplay, but not a interesting crafter of a screenplay.
Right. He's so like this will work. Just do it.
He made it interesting the whole time. I was entertained the whole time, but I wasn't. It wasn't interesting. Yeah. So like I wasn't bored, but I wasn't interested. So but the problem is a lot of Star Trek episodes were like I am interested, but I'm bored. A lot of Star Trek original series episodes.
Like, this is a great mystery. I hope they say something about it soon.
Right, and that's the continual problem with the original series is that very interesting but kind of boring. This one was not boring, but not very interesting. If that makes sense. Yeah. But also Dr. Mbenga was great. And I love the quote, our weapons grew faster than our wisdom. I think that's very interesting and important for our culture in general. Great writing on that line. So trivia, there's some good stuff for this because it's kind of a classic episode that's regarded. So the Mugatu was called the Gumato in the original script, but DeForest Kelley, who plays Bones, kept mispronouncing it, so it was changed. The closing credits still named the creature as the Gumato. Which I thought was funny. He just couldn't say Gumato. The stock footage of the White Rabbit's footprints from the Star Trek original series episode Shore Leave, which we've already covered, was used for the Mugatu prints of his footprints. Yeah. All right. The Star Trek universe has been known to tackle societal, political, environmental, and other types of issues throughout the history of the franchise. This one tackled the Vietnam War head on, not only specifically pointing out the 20th century brush wars on the Asian continent, but also as portraying the Federation and the Klingon Empire as superpowers, using an otherwise peaceful world as pawns in their struggle for power, a direct allegory of the Cold War at the time between NATO and the Red Bloc. So, yeah, it was fascinating. The Mugato was designed by Janos Prosaka, who had created the Horta in the original series episode, The Devil in the Dark. So
weird cave pancake.
But he created that thing. It was the same suit that he used and he created for the White Gorilla in the Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, Fatal Cargo in 1967, and Garbuna, a cross between a gorilla and a baboon in Here's Lucy, Lucy Safari in 1969. So he used that same suit 3 different times.
Wow. Talk about getting your money's worth.
He just added the spikes for this episode. Just saying. And all 3 episodes, he played the person in the suit.
That's how he kept it alive so long. He's got to be gentle in this thing.
Janos Prosoka. Janos Prahoska. And the last thing, this is the only episode in season 2 to not have happy ending music. The only
this is one of the episodes I could arguably say did not have a happy ending.
Not really. No, it's kind of fucked up. Yeah. So there you go. That is that episode. Steve, what are the Trek Connections, Muppet Connections episode?
Oh man. So this one's actually pretty good. The other 2 are loose, but this one's great. Kirk and Uhura's kiss later on, I believe, than we've watched, raised a lot of hackles with concerns about outrage in the southern broadcast regions. NBC had been hit just a little while before with an incident where there was outrage during a Petula Clark special where she put her arm on put her hand on Harry Belafonte's arm, suggesting romance, and there was outrage.
Oh my God.
Both Petula Clark and Harry Belafonte are Muppet Show special guests.
Absolutely.
So yeah, similar outrage. And the Petula Clark special is what primed the pump for the fear surrounding the Kirk Uhura kiss.
That's important. Yeah, that makes sense.
Nancy Kovacs, who played Nona this week, played the lead opposite of former Muppet Show guest Vincent Price in a movie called Diary of a Madman. So she was in the movie with Vincey.
And she's gorgeous, by the way. She's absolutely gorgeous.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say she is the most attractive Star Trek guest we've had.
One of the, yes, absolutely.
I'm going to put her at the top of the heap.
Whew, all right. That should be
That's
one of
gonna
our
be the
top 10 at the
about.
end. Yeah.
Oh, God. No, let's stay away from that.
Yeah, we shouldn't probably.
Ned Romero, who played Krell, the Klingon in this episode, also, and this isn't really a Muppet connection, but just a cool fact, he went on and appeared in an episode of Star Trek, The Next Generation, Journey's End, and then he went on to be in Voyager and played the role of Chakotay's grandfather.
That's true. Yeah. We'll get to that in about 7 years.
Yeah. 7 years. Something like that. We're pretty close. 5.5 or something. Yeah.
Something like that.
I keep saying 7 years, but we've already been doing this for a year and a half. So
it's true.
So we got 5.5 years.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. It's fine. It'll happen. It's good.
It's going to happen. But those are all the Trek connections this week.
Very nice. And so we have some similarities between these exact same episodes.
They're basically the same show.
I mean, come on. So Petula Clark in the Muppet Show episode finds a fish in Rolf's piano.
Yes.
That is the cause for him missing notes when he's playing piano. So Kirk finds that the Klingons are involved in corrupting the planet Neural society, just like the fish, causing it to go to war.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just corruption.
Corruption. The fish is corrupting the piano. The Klingons corrupting the society.
Both feature obtrusive species getting in the protagonist's way. Mickey Mouse with Kermit and the Klingons with Kirk.
Very true. Exactly. The Neural planet was supposed to be a utopian society, just as the Muppet Show was supposed to end with a beautiful glass fountain. But alas, Neural was destroyed by war, and the Muppet Show was destroyed by a moose.
By Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
Both feature conflicts between parties that have no good reason to have firearms. The Rooster Showdown and the Warring Tribes.
You're so right. You're so right. Oh, God. What's that noise?
Malfunction.
Oh, God.
Transporter malfunction.
So that noise means, and that cough that Steven just produced, was that the transporter malfunction's happening, which means that one character from one episode is being transported to the other episode and vice versa. So what you got for us, Steve?
This week, Trek to Muppets, I've got Nona coming over and replacing Petula Clark specifically in The Boy from Ipanema because they're both wearing the same bell-bottom pants.
That is fair because Nona had some very bell-bottom pants.
Very bell-bottom.
Yeah. I have the moose could have gone over and been Tyree because a dumb guy who is screwing things up and not ever being who you need him to be. That is the moose, and that is Tyree.
Right. It'd be John Wayne the whole time.
I don't know what you want, Pilgrim.
That a musket there. Muppets to Trek this week, I've got the chickens coming over and replacing the two warring clans. Facing off and posturing and then shooting at each other wildly and missing.
That works so well. I have Petula Clark transport over to be Nona. She'd be good at convincing the monsters and humans, the Mugatus and the humans alike to do what she needs them to do. If she could convince a moose, she can convince a Mugatu. She could.
That's right. They both have horns.
Exactly. So that brings us to the end of episode 48 of the MuppeTrek podcast.
Join us next time as we step into season 3 of The Muppet Show. And as an update, we're going to be moving away from the British release order, which made sense at one point. But now that it's all available on Disney Plus, we are going to be moving over to the production order as it is displayed on Disney Plus, so you guys can follow along more easily at home. And that means we'll be moving on to Chris Christopherson and Rita Coolidge as special guests.
Which makes somewhat sense. And we're going to the original series episode, Return of Tomorrow.
So from the lovers, the dreamers, and us,
live long and prosper, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the MuppeTrek podcast. Be sure to follow us on social media on Facebook and Twitter.
Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform.
This podcast has been brought to you by A Play on Nerds.